Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Coach's Approach podcast, where we take an inside look at the coaching world. As always, I'm your host, George Gresco, and we have a big show for you guys tonight as we start show number one of our two-show series. For the first time ever, we're putting out two shows in one night, so I'm super excited about that. Please check out thecoachesapproach.com and follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and listen on Anchor and Spotify. Another announcement I want to make real quick. We are looking for the Coach's Approach podcast Coach of the Year. It can be a head coach, assistant coach, any coach in any sport, and throw out the records and accolades because we don't care about them. We are looking for the coach that impacts student athletes' lives. Nominations must be in by January 15th. Email nominations to georgegresco12@gmail.com. Today's episode, Creating Culture, is brought to you by Coach's Dry Rub, the All-American Rub. Lay it on thick until it sticks. Get your own bottle at tombaskitchen.com. Anthony's Family Restaurant in Eastlake on the corner of 91 and Vine Street, where together is our favorite place to be. Open for dine-in, carry-out, and curbside pickup. Last but not least, G&G Printing. Get your custom apparel printed in 7 to 10 days or less. Dominate your design. Today in the coach's booth, we have Coach JP Nerbun, the basketball coach, sports consultant, and author. Coach Nerbun, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, this is awesome to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you. And it's been fun because I've been reaching out to coaches, and I believe you're over in Ireland right now, I believe.
Yeah, just outside of Dublin. So,
See, that's awesome. I had a coach from Texas on. I had a coach from Poland on. That's in the Germany Football League. So it's been pretty cool to kind of reach out to coaches from all around the world and kind of get their perspective on things.
well, it's cool to connect with some of my roots since I got family in Cleveland. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Coach, we'll go ahead and get started. Coach, you are an author of two different books. In 2019, you published Calling Up, Discovering Your Journey to Transformational Leadership. And then in 2022, you published The Culture System, a proven process for creating extraordinary team culture. Can you talk a little bit about each book that you've written and what kind of gave you the motivation to write them?
Yeah, absolutely. The first one came from my experiences as a coach over the last 10, 11, 12 years. More source the latter half of that decade of coaching, and just some of the challenges that I was experiencing around culture, about building relationships, new challenges that I hadn't experienced earlier in my career. Some that I had, but and it was some of it was a reaction to that, but also towards some traction that I started to get in my own coaching. I started working with a guy named Jamie Gilbert, who used to be with an organization called Train to Be Clutch, and he started helping give me some tools to build culture, but also most importantly, to focus on how I was leading my team and to be more reflective and to be more intentional in my coaching, to make sure that my behaviors were aligning with my values. And so that book came from there. And then you fast forward to, the culture system. And that, is a more of a nonfiction book, tells the stories of a lot of great organizations, a lot of great teams, but all those stories are built around a principle, a tool, a concept, or a skill that we've found that to be essential in great team culture or organizational culture. And they are used by great teams, Chicago Cubs, or the San Antonio Spurs, but also a Toyota, or just different organizations out there, school, community, court. Like we talk about these stories, but the concept, the tool, can be used within coaching, and so we've used these tools and concepts with the many programs that I've gotten the privilege of working with, or really the coaches that I've gotten the privilege of working with and coaching over the last 6 to 7 years. And so we put them all into one book, and that's what you've got with the culture system. It's kind of the best of these tools and methods.
Right, and it's pretty awesome because now you're actually, I think, the third or fourth coach that's came on that is now an author too. So I think it's pretty cool that you're getting your words out in the way of a book. That way, people can you can really relate to them and they can relate to you. So I think that's pretty awesome. And then, Coach, can you tell the viewers and listeners where can they find your books at?
Yeah, you can just get them all on Amazon. They're on Audible. They're also on ebook, Kindle, and they're on paperback. If you want to learn more about the book, you can go to myculturesystem.com. There'll be loads of details there.
Absolutely, and I can send all that information out and put it on my website later on too. Um, Coach, you are also the founder of TOC Culture Consulting. It's a global sports consulting business. Can you talk a little bit about what your business does?
Yeah, so around 2016, like I mentioned earlier, I kind of gone through a crisis of leadership and within my team's culture. And so I really started, I'd always been trying to improve myself, always trying to figure out how to build the culture. I knew that word culture, or however you want to define it, I define it as the strength of the relationships and the and how high the standards are. But I always knew culture was that key, like it was the most important element to team success, that you would fail without it. But I struggled to build it. Well, kind of had rock bottom as a leader, went through some struggles myself. And as I started to make changes, I started to just blog about it. And what I found was people resonated, some coaches resonated with my writing, they resonated with the tools. And then I started a podcast as I started to read more and more books. I mean, read a book a week, and I start to interview these authors and all these great leaders and great thinkers, and I start to collect their ideas, and then I start to create my own, maybe how you might apply some of those ideas within a practical, like in a high school context. Like you can take an idea from Bill Walsh, but like, well, how does Bill Walsh's concepts that the 49ers apply to a high school football coach? Well, I really enjoyed making that bridge, and so I started producing my own content as well. And during my time as a leader where I really struggled, the thing I didn't need was, I didn't need someone coming in and giving a workshop. Now, there's not saying there's any value on that. I still do that. I still do that for coaches. But what I really needed was someone to talk to, someone to support me, someone to help coach me through these things. So at the core of what I do now is coaching. I coach coaches. And, that might seem a little bit weird or a little bit different for a lot of coaches out there. But the best leaders in the world, they all have coaching. All the executives of the large organizations. And I've had the privilege of not just working with sports coaches, but I've worked with a surgeon, I've worked with a CEO, I've worked with a COO, I've worked with a school principal. I mean, like people need coaching in leadership. It's so valuable. I knew it from my own experience, and obviously in my work with other coaches.
Absolutely, and people don't realize that there's not only sports teams, there's teams inside school buildings, there's teams of high corporations, and people need to be coached and kind of build off of what they need to do to be successful. Absolutely. Now, Coach, you would have coached both women's and men's basketball at the very highest of levels. Also, what would you say is the biggest difference in coaching men to women? Because you've coached both of them at very high levels.
Well, I'm reasonably good at coaching men, and I'm not very good at coaching women. No, I'm just joking. I always struggled. I mean, I was coaching my first year, and I got fired. From one of the second league pro teams. I was coaching a women's team. I just my manner, my lack of empathy, just a lot of the things that I struggle with as an individual, as a leader, my natural tendencies, I don't think always match up with
Right.
maybe the relational needs that women need first, maybe a little bit more than men. But as I become more intentional in my leadership, I worked through that, and I was able to coach a very talented college team in Ireland, and women's team, and we won the national championship there, which was more so that they were talented than I was a good coach, if I was just to be fully transparent. But as I've worked in coaching women, I think it takes a little bit more intentionality to tone back some aspects where I can be just very, very process driven, and I don't create a lot of space for those relationships. Doesn't mean that I don't need to do that as well on the men's side.
Right.
I definitely need to do the men's side. I just think it hurt me even more on the women's side for sure.
Absolutely. And coach, you've coached, we mentioned this already, you coach professional, you've coached at the collegiate and high school levels in the United States, in Ireland, and Lithuania. Can you talk a little about your experiences just coaching from all over the world?
Yeah, it's very interesting how the culture of a country, can impact the culture of a
Oh,
team. And so my experience first, was getting into in Ireland. And when you're coaching in Ireland, Irish culture, there's a very dry sense of humor. They don't like a lot of rah-rah enthusiasm, and
yeah.
and that, which is a lot of American sports, right? So I come over from America. I just played college Division I basketball at University of South Carolina for a year there as a walk-on, and I come in and I'm like the motivational speaker, and I'm giving all these pep talks, and they're just like, "Is this guy crazy?" Right? And so as I coached 5 years there, I became more dry. I've really, I've taken to Irish culture. And so then, you transplant me to America, and there's none of that. It's just,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of swearing, and there's a lot of just very dry coaching, and the players, they needed a little bit more of that enthusiasm, a little bit more of that charisma that is, definitely within me.
Right.
So culturally, you have to adapt, and then, when you're coaching in Lithuania, I was spending my summers there, would coach during there and work with players that were coming over to the States on college or high school like scholarships, and it was more of a selection process. And there I got to be immersed in a small country of, I think, around 3 million people, that basketball is everything, right? Like they're like,
Right.
it's just it's everything and anything, so to see a culture that's so obsessed, but that is so obsessed with playing the game the right way. I mean, that was just an eye-opening experience and a very, very big learning experience for sure. And that's probably what I think my biggest takeaway from being in Lithuania was, widening my horizons on how to approach coaching or teaching the game.
Right, and absolutely. I mean, just the culture shock. I had I told you earlier I had a coach from Poland on a few weeks ago, and he said it was just such a change going from, the United States to over there, because there was just certain things, as you're saying, they like to be rah-rah. They want to hear, hear motivational talks. There it's kind of dry. They're like, let's just go to work,
Mm-hmm.
please. So
Yeah,
that's kind of crazy.
there's this you probably don't even know about me. A little tip, quick fact is, I actually, when I was in Ireland, I was, years ago, I was playing semi-pro. I was playing in the top league of Irish American football.
Okay.
And so that was quite the experience of
Wow.
American football in Ireland. And if you've seen, have you seen The Replacements, that movie
Yeah, oh
with,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I think he's a Scottish guy in that, but like
Yeah.
we on our sideline would literally have guys smoking
Yeah.
cigarettes. It was crazy. So,
Yeah, and
I
that's
mean, it's
and that was something
wild
the
stuff.
coach that was on. He said when they first started the league, it was like playing in like the 20s. They had a helmet, no face mask. They didn't have equipment. They had a mouthpiece, so they were like very excited just to have the little equipment that they had.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. Now getting into some of the culture questions that I have for you. So good programs talk about culture, and the bad programs also talk about culture. What is the most common culture issues within a sports program?
Yeah, that's I would say two of the big ones that jump out at me is there is a lack of relationships. There's a disconnect between the coach and the players, and there's a disconnect between player to player. There's just, essentially, it comes down to those relationships having a lack of trust.
Sure.
And so that just can erode it. And then there's also a lack of clear standards around how we want to do things. And that and there's a shared goal, right? Shared purpose, but also that shared standard. Like, this is how we want to do things day in and day out. Now, I know that that seems very theoretical. So let's break that down real quick of what that really kind of like means.
Sure.
Well, from day one, is it all about football? Is it all about basketball? Is the coach are the coaches having just conversations about the kids' performance? Or are they getting to know them, first off, what their individual goals are, as well as their goals for the team, and what they want that experience to be like? Are they having conversations about those relationships? Are they getting their insights into what, not just what they want the team to be about, but how to get there? Are they allowing them to have input into some of the standards and to some of the solutions to fix the culture? The other aspect is just getting to them as people and showing them that you value them beyond what
Right.
they can do on a football field, a basketball court, or a soccer field, right? Like, it has to go beyond that. And so when people know that you care because you've shown that, not just you've said that. I used to have a high school coach. He used to tell us he cared all the time, but I never knew that he cared because he never showed it to me, right? And so we have to show that with, number one is quality time, great conversations, where we're asking great questions. And there's no better way to do that from day one. Sit down with your guys and work through your team and just ask them questions. Hey, What do you enjoy about playing this sport? What don't you enjoy about being a part of this team? And what's something we got to fix? Those three questions in and of itself can open up a load of stuff, as well as what's important to you, what goals do they have for not just for that sport, but for life in
Right.
general.
Right. Now, do you think this isn't even a question I had on here, but do you think that I've seen it more and more now recently that teams and are hiring more younger coaches to deal with their players and kind of because they can kind of connect more. Do you think that's the reason why that they're hiring more younger head coaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a tendency to move towards more of these younger coaches, more players type coaches. Maybe that's because they have better ability to connect,
Right.
with that generational gap. Maybe that it's just becoming harder. Maybe it's because these coaches are more up to date with more modern coaching techniques. The
Sure.
other thing I would say is I look at a lot of coaching out there though, and whether it's young or old, the players coach, I'm all about the great relationships.
Yeah.
But if I have a really great relationship with you, I have a really strong relationship with you, then I'm also going to hold you accountable. I'm going to hold you to a
Yeah.
high standard that we've all agreed upon, that we've all communicated. We all said, hey, this is our standard, and this is how I'm going to hold you accountable. That's absolutely vital. If I don't hold you to a high standard, the standard that we've agreed upon, then I don't truly care about you.
Right.
And so I see a lot of, this is one of the great challenge of coaching is like, we're permissive. We allow players to get away with things that are below the line, that are below the standard, instead of holding that to that standard in a way that's kind and firm, that's demanding, while being respectful. And that's what you need a lot more of too in coaching. We don't need just this permissive making excuses for the players or just a bunch of lectures. We need accountability. We need consequences when we fail to meet our standards.
No, I agree 100% with you, and I'm getting goosebumps over here because a lot of times now we're dealing with kids that they don't know, they don't have consequences for their actions a lot of the time. But now, Coach, how would you describe what good culture looks like within a program? I know you mentioned a few things already, but what does good culture look like?
I like to use a graph, Greg, to kind of illustrate this.
Sure.
At the bottom is on the x-axis is the relationships, and the y-axis is the standards. So how high are the standards, how strong the relationships. Your relationships can only be so strong if you have a level of accountability, right? And you can only have such high standards if you have limited relationships. You have to have a relationship to be able to hold them to the standard. What drives that all forward is the leadership. It starts with you, and then it should really decentralize throughout the players. We talk about leadership councils, captains councils, being super intentional in how it works throughout the organization to decentralize command, to empower others to lead, your coaching staff, your captains, and to really actually lead, to actually be part of the decision-making process. And when I say decisions, I mean helping to identify issues and find solutions. That's what a great leadership team does. So you build it out, and that's what drives, continues to move the relationships forward and move the standards higher. That's at the end of the day, when that great culture is working well, what you have is not just high performance, but you have great experience.
Right.
People enjoy being there. You got great memories, and people are transformed by the experience. And that's what we want. We want to win championships. We want to be a high performing team, but we also want it to come here every day, enjoy what we're doing. And we want to remember, right? We want to have these relationships that last beyond just this season.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, we all want to become better people because of having played for this team. That's the ultimate goal for us. I think that's the ultimate vision.
And that kind of leads me to a quote that a coach I had on the show one of my first couple seasons doing this. He said, good teams are coach driven. The great teams are player driven. And I think that's kind of what sums up what you kind of just said. But once you get, everything moving in the right direction, the players will start leading the team rather than being coach driven. Now this kind of reminds me. So when a coach first gets hired in a program, what's the first thing he should kind of do to start building a positive culture within the building?
Press pause and get curious.
Yep.
One of the worst things that we can do is just come in with this idea, and it's so hard. I remember when I first got my first job in America, I came with this big vision, this grand plan. I was going to bring European basketball to America in a way in Tennessee where it had never been brought before. And it
Right.
was all about my vision, my plan. Pause, slow down, get curious. We're not, culture is not about building. You don't come in there and level the place and then start to build a foundation. Culture building is more like creating, it's more like gardening. You come in, you observe what's good, what can we continue to nurture and grow. There are already good things happening. You have to start by acknowledging the good, or else people will get really ticked off with you, honestly. You come in and just trying to level. And secondly, you need to recognize, all right, what actually needs to maybe be removed, okay, and then what needs to be improved. Now, great story about this and how what this looks like practically actually doesn't come from a coach, right? One of my favorite stories is of Captain Mike Abershoff, who I believe in 2000 took over the USS Benfold. And at the time in the Navy, the Benfold was the worst ship across all the performance metrics. Its retention rate was 20%. And what Abershoff did when he came in there, the first 6 weeks, he sat down with all 316 sailors and he brought them into his office and he talked to each one of them. And he said, hey, he shared about himself. He was vulnerable. He connected with the person. He learned their name. And he said, hey, what do you enjoy about being on the ship? What don't you enjoy? And if you were me, what's one thing you would do differently? And if someone gave him a good idea, he'd get on the microphone and said, implemented this right away. And he told the whole ship, you know, this so-and-so told me this, and we're going to go ahead and we're running with it right away. And he just instantly started to impact change, but everyone felt part of that change. Right. And he sold them on the vision of being the best damn ship in the U.S. Navy. And you know what happened? They became the best damn ship in the U.S. Navy a year later. And they had the 100% retention and the top of the metrics. And that's honestly, I've had so many coaches that I've had, got to coach through that experience. I love working with a new coach, taking over a new program, because it is a unique opportunity to, hit a reset on a culture when it's done the right way and get people excited, because not about just your vision, it becomes a shared vision through that.
And that's why I love doing this show, because that's a story that I have never heard, actually. So I really like that. I'm going to look this up after, and I'm definitely going to use that story in the very near future for sure. Coach, we've talked about that you've coached professionally at the high school levels, the college level. You've coached all around the world. What would you say is your favorite coaching memory?
I got to give you two, man. But the first is, I had coached 5 years in Ireland, and I moved back to the States, and I get married a few years later. And I had some young players as coach at the time, and having a couple of my players save all summer long to fly over to America for my wedding was just an amazing experience. Just great affirmation, and for them to be in those photos, it's really special, really special. And probably after that, I was down in Tennessee, and one of the last games that I coached down in Tennessee, at Notre Dame High School, was, it was just this beautiful upset win. We had gone through one of my hardest years in coaching, win and loss record wise, but one of my most meaningful and fulfilling seasons. But it was a hard year, and we had gotten clobbered by this number 2 team in the state by 30 and 45 points, and we blew them out by 25 and went on to be repeat conference champions. Wow. And it wasn't about the win as much as just the feeling of like this group of men, young men, had come together early in that season, and against a lot of odds, a lot of external pressure, never broke apart. And to share that moment of like, we've never stopped believing, and having that look, I think every coach desires that experience where it's not this picture perfect season. It's not the 20-0 season, the 12-0 season. It's just, it's a season of really hard times that makes that end, that shining moment so much more special.
No, for sure. Especially, as you said, the difficult times, and then you get to that, you get to the peak and over the mountain, you end up winning the game. And that's the exciting stuff. When as a coach, all the hard work, determination, that kind of pays off in the end. But Coach, this next segment is brought to you by Coach's Dry Rub. This is our fun segment of the show. It's called Rapid Fire 7, where I will ask you 7 completely random questions. I haven't seen them yet, so it could be absolutely anything, Coach. So be prepared. Are you ready?
I'm never good with these things, but I'll give it my best.
All right. What is your favorite animal?
My dog, Larry, for sure. There you go.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't heard my dog barking, but he's right outside the door waiting for me. But Who is your favorite basketball player of all time?
John Stockton.
There you go. That's a good one. Um, what are you most proud of?
My family, the way that we've raised our three kids so far. There's still a lot of work to do, but
Right.
we're doing pretty good at 7, 5, and 2 years old.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a lot of
A lot
work
of-
right there. You're gonna have your own basketball team here soon. You start five.
There you go.
um, if your if your life had a theme song, what would it be?
Mm. Um, I'm just gonna give you just something musical, very instrumental, like very chill. Not that I am that way. I
Right.
just That's what I need in life is more because I'm a very intense, passionate human being, but I also need to like tone it down. So just some movie score from like Gladiator or something,
Oh, there you
probably.
go. There you go. um, what what is your go-to dance move?
Hmm. There's a great one that me and my buddy from Ireland love to do at all
Uh-oh.
weddings, which is, I mean, the people will clear the dance floor, and it involves me sliding, hopefully, about 15 feet through his legs out the other end, while twisting and turning. So
I
that's my
love it.
go-to.
I love it. What is the your favorite city you've been to?
Cleveland. No, I just can't. I'm
Cleveland.
just
Ah,
absolutely. Geez, I'm not going to say city. I'm just going to say the Irish countryside because I'm not a city guy.
right.
I love being out in the Irish countryside. I'm a big, runner, ultra runner. So I love getting out there outdoors.
That's awesome. And then last question is, what is the best advice that you have ever received?
Mm, that's a really tough one. I'll just go with someone gave me a couple books. A friend of mine from Tennessee. At the time, I was in a really tough moment in coaching, and he said, "JP, you need to read these two books." And one of them was a book called "Burn Your Goals" by Jamie Gilbert, who was my mentor at the time, and a good book. I think I've read a lot of other great books since then, but that book became the spark that got me to start to really reflect and seek help in my coaching, which I desperately needed coaching and mentorship at that time to help, work through some of my blind spots.
Oh, that's awesome. That's the end of Rapid Fire 7. That's always a fun segment because they're completely random. I have other people write these questions for me, so you just never know what you're gonna get. And no, it's always fun. But coach, as we near the end of the show, I always ask this question to every coach that comes on the show. Who is Coach Nerbun for the listeners and viewers who might not know you? Who is Coach JP Nerbun?
Mm. I'm very much a coach, just like probably every other coach listening to this podcast, in the sense that I have a family. You deal with the external pressures of I've dealt with those of fans, the criticisms, the parent complaints, trying to make sure your administrators are happy. I've dealt with the trying to build those relationships with players that you care about that don't seem to be connecting with. I've been in that situation. I've dealt with the internal pressures of self-doubt, burnout, exhaustion, knowing, asking the question, is it worth it? I've been that coach. I've been in those situations. I've experienced that. And through that, I've come out on the other side kind of more balanced, more centered on knowing who I am outside of myself as a coach. And so I have a very clear identity that's detached from Coach Nerbun. Coaching is a hat that I put on. It's not a person that I am. And I really recognize that, and am able to recognize that. And so I'm able to keep priorities like family in check, and making sure that I'm spending quality time with those while giving my best in the appropriate time that I have to coaching.
Oh, that's an awesome answer. But coach, once again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a great, conversation. And I haven't had too many like basketball coaches on the show and business owners. So it's been a great conversation. And I really thank you for coming on.
Well, you had some stellar questions, man. Those were fun. Those were interesting, and very different for me. So I appreciate
Well,
the
absolutely.
opportunity to be here.
And that's kind of why I started the podcast. I know everyone all coaches talk about the X's and O's side of things. I don't want to know about the X's and O's. I want to know about the background and, kind of how you got to where you are at now. So that's kind of why I started the podcast in the first place. But once again, I thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love you just diving into coaches' stories. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really powerful for sure.
But as we near the end of the show, I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers. You guys have been absolutely outstanding. Keep liking, sharing, posting, tweeting at me. But that's going to do it for tonight's episode of the Coaches Approach podcast. As always, I'm your host, George Gresco, and we will see you guys later.